Welcome to New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union. I'm your host, Sean. Man, today's been a weird day for news. So I've got some updates again about the stuff that's going on in Bernalillo County in New Mexico. First off, I have to eat a little bit of crow when I called out the NRA for their late joining of the legal action, because they're doing something that kind of backs us up. They have done some stuff at the state level of the New Mexico the state constitution, pertaining to the state constitution, I should say, that will actually back up what's happening at the federal level. So what the NRA is doing is they filed the same type of paperwork that other gun organizations would have to file or have filed for the temporary restraining order in state court. Now, what this is good for is it backs us up in case we lose federally. We shouldn't lose federally, but let's just be honest. We've all realized a while back that court nowadays is kind of 50-50, because what happens is we end up with these talking heads that find a way to manipulate the law. So that's one thing that's going on. The other thing that I think is more pertaining to this, specifically with Governor Grisham, is that this could be kind of a red herring, guys and girls. And what I mean by this is the next governor that tries to do something like this in another blue state, this is going to make it easier for them to not look as stupid, which means that this could be the test case to prove for like Gavin Newsom, or any other blue state governors that are trying to push this type of thing, just how hard to push to get it passed. Okay. The other thing I think that is interesting about this is going to fast track those sensitive places debates that are happening at the federal level. And some of them, like in New York and in Chicago and in California, they have codified with state law saying that these certain protected places like parks or like parking lots of state buildings, those types of places, that they are protected and they are considered private property that you cannot carry there. Okay? But what I could see this evolving into is that debate that is already going to be set to be happening at the federal level. Now it's going to happen. Okay? Because we've got a TRO on this. Now we've got people filing paperwork in New Mexico's favor, Bernalillo County's favor. And it could set precedents, case law that is, for those other states to get their illegal gun places, those special places, repealed. So this could be a good thing for us too. In addition to that, man, guys, I have been looking at the news, and how is it that our federal government could ever ban an AR-15 or any black rifle or any gun, period, when they lose a $90 million aircraft? Now, if you haven't heard the story, there was a Marine who ejected out of an F-35, and they lost it. Now, they've since found a debris field, and that they probably found it now, and there was an issue. So this pilot ejected. They have since grounded our F-35 fleet. At least the Marines have. Now, it's an interesting thought, at least for me, thinking about what is going on in our country when we're looking at stuff like this. Because was this just a $90 million oops that they have messed up in building and designing this aircraft? That's very possible. Is this an incidence of woke how do I put it, underqualified people flying a $90 million aircraft? Or, more disturbing, could this be a hack that someone found a way to hack some, we're poking the bear with the Russians and the Chinese right now. Could this be a hack that caused this weapon system, this F-35, to crash? Now, there's been a series of F-35 crashes, and I don't know, this is just me being an IT geek, that makes me worry about that. The same time this is going on, if you have not heard, which is it's been kept kind of quiet, is MGM Resorts in Nevada and Caesars, they're not resorts, casinos, they've been hacked. And now one of them, I don't know which one, I didn't look too much into the story because I was more so interested in what I'm about to say. One of them paid the ransom so that they could get their data back and get access to their files. The other one didn't. Now, what is the problem here? We're going into a place where very, very powerful tools, AI tools, are being made more and more available for people to use. And with our increasing reliance on digital technologies and the increased push for central bank digital currencies, what happens when you turn them off? Caesars casinos literally had to go to cash just to continue operations while they're doing their thing. Now, what would happen if the national money supply all became central bank digital currencies and they hack them, do something, ransomware them? They do the same thing they did to MGM Resorts. What would happen then? What kind of societal breakdown would happen? Now, I've been thinking about this for about 3 hours now after reading the article about MGM Grand Resorts, all the resorts. There's a huge swath of the strip in Vegas that has basically lost their digital technology until they pay their ransom. What are the repercussions of this? Now, between the F-35 crashing, and these could all be coincidence, and that type of large-scale hack happening, it makes me wonder if we're under attack digitally. Because why would you attack America's shores, which I believe that's happening on our southern border? They're seeing more and more people that are on our terrorist watch list coming across our border. Well, duh. There's no security there. Okay? Even New Mexico is now talking about our border towns being overwhelmed by immigrants. When you're seeing New York and other things like that complaining because, well, they're inflowing into those areas and they're not used to that type of stuff, we can only handle so many people coming in. It's an invasion. 200 years ago, if this had happened, we would have had military forces respond. Okay? In that same vein, there's an island in Italy that's been overran with 12,000 immigrants or illegals. This looks coordinated. Just from a 30,000 foot up, this looks like some sort of coordinated attack. One towards NATO, because that happened in Italy, the invasion of that one island. The invasion of our southern border. And now we're seeing increased cyber attacks on, right now, hotels and casinos. That's not a big cornerstone of our infrastructure. But it's not a hard leap to go from something like that, or at least thought-wise, to our utility system. So electricity, our water system, our natural gas system. All of these are controlled by electronic means right now. Now, SCADA, which is what the federal government has used to kind of isolate those and secure them, those type of institutional places or infrastructure. But with these increased attacks, and with equipment and components and pieces, parts coming from other countries, it doesn't take an IT rocket scientist to think that, did anybody bother to look for embedded code on these things? To see if there was some sort of bad embedded code in controllers or PCBs or printed circuit boards, that we're putting into core infrastructure pieces. If I was the enemy of the United States, pick the country, that's how I would attack. Why send a military force when you can turn off the lights? Look what happens to those big cities when they are made to, they have a little bit of pain. Let's just put it that way. If they couldn't conduct commerce, couldn't sell things in New York City, what kind of chaos would that cause? You know? And then, of course, the other thing I thought was interesting about the news is I saw David Hogue flip around and say, 1 minute he's saying what the governor of New Mexico is doing is illegal, which we knew he was going to flip-flop anyway on. To today, he's posting tweets and talking about an office that it's been 2 years since he proposed an office for gun violence. Whether to study it or whether to take action on, doesn't matter. We still have this one key issue that we're seeing time and time again, and they're all related. Mental health. You cannot look at the issues we have with transgenderism that are exponentially worse than what they were 5 years ago. You cannot look at the people throwing themselves down and trying to protest climate change, and they're doing it very immaturely. You cannot look at the gun violence that we do have. You cannot look at the overrunning of shops and businesses by thieves without looking at this from that perspective of an attack. It is all happening at once. Is it pure societal decay? Either way, we need to start thinking about who your friends are, where they're at, and how to rally around each other. Because there's none of us that are going to make it through this situation that is being pushed upon us by whatever powers or by the total lack of capability of doing the job without each other. We need to build community. We need to strengthen family ties. We need to make sure that we know who we can count on. I have a core group of friends, a core group of listeners who are my friends. And I have no doubt if things go down that path, that we will organize. We may have to do it by radio, but we'll organize. I have one of my best friends forever. I've spoken about him all the time. He's one of my biggest supporters, one of my best friends. I have two of those, actually, I could say that I talk to pretty regularly. And both of them, I have no doubt, would be in my corner. I have another one of my friends who is ex-military, who makes some of the best beer on planet Earth, that I haven't got to contact in a while. But he would be another one of those. I have another friend that I get to talk to pretty late at night on weekends usually. And he's an amazing person. He's an awesome guy who's actually I've known since like high school. He's another one. Not to mention all my family. We're all strapped. We all have different skills. Those skills are going to be important. I don't know that my skill is, because my skill is in the IT space. And And it's becoming more and more apparent that I have more skills in other things. Right now I'm currently running network cable just to make ends meet while I'm waiting for that next job. But that's something I can add, But there's a ton more. I can fish, I can hunt, I can, a country boy will survive. And my daddy did teach me a lot about survival and trained me to be very capable if the ball drops and we're in that situation. But with all these weird-ass stories that are going on, what the hell's going on? I mentioned it before on this podcast. If you just took the stories from today and compared them to 5 years ago, how would you explain it to yourself then? Are we on the precipice of civil war? I think that there's a lot of squeaky wheels that are trying to push us that way, but I don't believe that the average person has the stomach for a civil war. I think that government people, like our governor in New Mexico, is trying to push us that way, because if there's one issue that I think would cause a civil war, and because it's caused a revolutionary war, is trying to take away guns from innocent civilians. The other issue I think that would possibly cause a civil war is abortion rights. Whether you agree with them or don't, I personally believe that killing a baby is, at any time, is taking a life. And that is something we need to have an honest discussion about. And no one can define when the term is, when it changes from just being a clump of cells, as some groups like to call them, or a human being. But I ask you, in that vein, if you were to kill a child unintentionally of a mother, so you shot the mother in the womb, and she had just conceived, and she knew she had conceived and she was carrying a baby, wouldn't you be facing a murder charge? So, whether you agree or not, I'm still of the volition that you need to have that ability to choose. And the reason why I do is because you're going to have to stand before someone at some point in time for all your actions. That's one of the things I've loved about the Libertarian Party and where have gone with their non-aggression principle, is because the society we are going to, or where we're going, mandating something is not the way forward. We saw it with the COVID stuff. It didn't work. It wasn't effective. All it did was shut down society. The same thing could happen even if you agree with the law. What we have to do is improve the culture our society has, so that whatever action we don't want them to take, killing people one way or another, is just so abhorrent to the culture, the people itself, that they don't do it. Now, there's still a core group of Americans, I firmly believe, in all my listeners, because I still don't have a huge following here. All my listeners, I'm pretty sure I know who they are, and I'm pretty sure they all have that core mandate. They have some sort of higher calling or some sort of higher morals that it's abhorrent to do something like that. Abhorrent, I should say. Killing someone has always been illegal. Killing someone unless you absolutely have to, that's a different story. When you go into military parlance type stuff, you kill or you be killed. When we start talking about civil war, that's talking about American people. And that's where the heartburn is for a lot of people, including myself, is because a civil war would tear our country apart when we are, let's just be honest, on the precipice of World War III. There's a lot of people right now pushing for World War III with Ukraine. And I don't see very many options when you keep giving weapon systems to one side that are eventually going to affect the balance. That is something that eventually will cause the next phase. Not to mention, I don't believe Russia's going to stop even after they take Ukraine. And I still believe they're going to take Ukraine because they have more forces. And whether they doing it with 1950s tanks, there's no math when the other side simply doesn't have enough people to fight those. You can give them the best weapons on planet Earth, but if there's no one to man those weapons, you're going to lose. And that's what Ukraine's facing right now. So despite what they say on every news channel, mainstream news channel, I still think Ukraine, while they may be making advances, making headway in some places, they're going to lose. Because eventually, they're going to run out of people that are going to be capable to fight. You can't stand the Ukrainian military up, even with the best weapons, when they're facing down 10-1. That's the same thing when the United States, if you think about if we had to fight the Chinese, the only way we would win the war with China, I still believe, is that we'd blockade them and stop them from getting their core resources they need, because China is one of the most exposed countries in the economic order, where they need 75% of what they need is imported. You blockade those, they deindustrialize and die within 2 months. Meaning all their food comes from external, well, not all their food. 75% of their food, one way or another, comes from other parts of the country, the world. 75% of their energy needs comes from other parts of the world that they do not domestically produce. You shut off power, you shut off energy, you shut off food, you deindustrialize. That's just math there. And how could we do that? We could stay off past the first island chain, and they can't simply reach us with their weapons. Now they can try to nuke the mainland, our country, and they may be successful there. What would be the counter to that, though? See, this is what terrifies me, talking to one of my really good friends about nuclear war and tactical nukes. Tactical nukes would be used in theater. And I believe that if it gets bad enough and we end up going toe-to-toe, the United States ends up going toe-to-toe with Ukraine, I absolutely think the Russians would use nukes then, because they'd be forced to. Because what we've seen in almost 2 years of full war with the Russians is they're not capable of standing toe-to-toe with us, even with our woke military. For one, the Russians still don't own the entire Ukrainian airspace. When have you seen any of the last 20 years of war that the United States has been in that we don't own the airspace? Even with our new busted aircraft, the F-35. So as we're getting into those little places, I have a lot of friends that are very conspiratory and very conspiracy-minded. And I understand why. Because this looks like a coordinated attack. You cannot look at this stuff and see coincidence after coincidence after coincidence after coincidence without wondering where the attack's coming from. So, I'm going to give you the same advice I would always give you. Train, stay strapped or get clapped. It's raining in New Mexico, in northwest New Mexico. So it's always a good plan to keep your powder dry. Like, share, subscribe, be great.